Maneuver warfare relies on space. In open terrain, military forces generate operational advantages by layering combined arms across vast distances. The physical density of a city strips those distances away. Inside 200 meters, armor becomes a liability, easily targeted from above. Close air support proves too imprecise over structures that civilians still occupy. Concrete walls and floor slabs absorb radio signals, degrading communications. Higher echelon support vanishes. The burden of combat drops rapidly down the chain of command. Battalions do not breach floors. Brigades do not clear rooms. The entire operational reality compresses entirely onto the shoulders of a single 9 to 13 person squad. This wireframe model illustrates the shift in terrain logic. The city operates as a volatile, continuously active three-dimensional stack. Tactical doctrine simplifies this vertical stack into the four-floor model, organized around three primary planes: streets, sewers, and skylines. To survive, a squad must operate across all three planes at once. Focus entirely on the street, and you take fire from the roof. Secure the roof, and the enemy resupplies through the basement. Ignoring any single vector guarantees defeat from the unaddressed plane. Looking at this dense architectural layout, the rules of movement shift. In open environments, troops bound from a ridgeline to a cluster of vegetation. In the urban core, formations must bound by structure, from a doorway to a breached wall, as structural geometry dictates the limits of cover. Walking down a street's centerline exposes a squad to fire from buildings on both sides. Movement requires hugging structural walls to mask visual and thermal signatures, minimizing the angles from which the unit can be engaged. At the surface level, certain spaces act as linear danger areas. Large open plazas, wide urban alleys, and critical intersections force squads to briefly abandon cover, creating predictable engagement zones. This schematic illustrates the four-corner problem. The threat comes from adjacent buildings, where upper-floor windows create intersecting fire vectors converging on the crossing element. Squads mitigate this by executing multiple short bounds to intermediate cover, or moving armored vehicles forward to screen the dismounted infantry. Surface movement in the urban fight requires an active, continuous mathematical exercise in minimizing geometric exposure. This cutaway shows the required geometry for three-dimensional isolation. A squad must establish a surface cordon, cover rooftop networks, and seal basement accesses. Without this 3D quarantine, the enemy simply withdraws through unmapped routes to an adjacent building and continues the fight. Once isolated, the entry point dictates the terms of the fight. Ground floor entrances are almost always prepared with explosive devices and barricades designed to funnel an entry team into a concentrated choke point. Entering at ground level forces a bottom-up clearance against a defender who has pre-sighted the stairwells. Inserting onto the roof for a top-down clearance disrupts the defender's preparation, though it limits the squad's own withdrawal routes if the operation stalls. Applying explosives to interior walls creates a mouse hole, allowing a team to move horizontally between rooms without stepping into an exposed street. The structural point where a squad penetrates the building irreversibly shifts their clearance trajectory, dictating their overall probability of survival. Inside, the ground floor contains the defender's primary withdrawal routes and initial traps. Bypassing these requires a methodical pace to identify tripwires and channel barricades without losing operational tempo. The interior stairwell acts as the ultimate architectural choke point. It forces a squad into a steep, narrow incline, severing them from external suppressive fire. Once a room is secured, it rarely stays that way. Buildings contain hidden utility shafts, drop ceilings, and adjacent basement connections that allow an enemy to re-infiltrate space the squad has already cleared. This cross-section illustrates the security tax. As a squad clears upward, they permanently detach members on each floor to secure their rear. This dynamic creates an operational halt limit. When the forward element shrinks to an unviable fighting size, clearance must stop for reinforcement. A squad's forward momentum is strictly governed by the mathematics of structural security. The architecture itself imposes a hard physical limit on clearance operations. Looking at these combatants inside a concrete archway, we see the extensive exploitation of the subterranean layer. This infrastructure ranges from standard municipal sewers and storm drains to sophisticated, purpose-built tactical networks. Underground, the atmosphere itself is a threat. Operations require multi-gas detectors to identify invisible hazards like accumulating methane, toxic hydrogen sulfide, and carbon monoxide. standard military gas masks are useless in oxygen-depleted environments. Sustained operations require heavy, time-limited, self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA. Tunnel combat demands highly specialized kit. The geometry amplifies muzzle blasts to deafening levels, requiring extreme confined space hearing protection, while the density of Earth necessitates wired field telephones instead of radios. If a squad encounters a tunnel without this specialized equipment, the leader's decision rule is strict. They do not pursue. They default to surveillance and denial of the access point. The subterranean plane is uniquely unforgiving. Entering it without proper equipment guarantees casualties from conditions the squad cannot manage. Sealing the surface accesses is the only viable professional response. The most dangerous moments in any urban operation occur in the physical transitions between the surface, the subterranean, and the vertical planes. This diagram highlights transition seams in flashing orange. Whether descending a manhole or crossing rooftops, architecture forces the squad into a vulnerable, single-file geometry. Survival dictates tempo. If exposure is the risk, prioritize speed. If the destination threat is unknown, extreme deliberation is required. Mastering these opposing tempos is the only way a squad prevents getting caught and systematically destroyed during the transitions of the urban stack. Panning across this devastated landscape reveals the immense architectural complexity of the urban battle space. The city acts as an active, hostile participant, engineered to break formation continuity at every turn. The core doctrine remains absolute. A unit must actively manage the streets, sewers, and skylines simultaneously. Neglecting any single vector invites catastrophic failure from that blind spot. This model tracks a squad simultaneously across a rooftop, interior floor, and sewer grate. Split across 3 planes, they use degraded comms for unified awareness. Under extreme cognitive load, the squad leader manages 3D geometry, atmospheric hazards, and attrition, making high-stakes decisions every few seconds. Survival in the urban core is achieved solely through extreme discipline, tactical precision, and an absolute